Opening up this week's Peacock and Williamson mailbag, Hard Knocks, Aaron Rodgers. Might have Matt convinced that he's in for another MVP season. And how should teams approach these preseason week 1 games? All that and more coming up on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look into the NFL on the field and in the front office. With elite breakdowns, next-level analysis, and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Big ups to the everydayers who are with us and giving us mailbag questions every week. We appreciate you. You can become an everydayer. Just subscribe on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. And by the way, we are in this mailbag episode. A lot of good questions here. Questions about Eric Bieniemy and kind of new school versus old school coaches and Hard Knocks and some takeaways from there. Aaron Rodgers could be on his way to another MVP season. And NFL running games, are they making a comeback now in the NFL because of how teams are defending the pass more often? But let's start with preseason week 1. We're not going to preview preseason games and especially preseason week 1 like we do regular season weeks and go through every game. And, you know, there's some nice players in all of these games, but we have an overriding question here from JDS on Twitter. And he says, which preseason approach is better, Matt? Ravens going all in, might be more ready for the season, but injuries could occur like Dobbins 2 years ago. Or Packers, who play no one and will probably lose week 1. I think the Rams have been a team like that. And there's more and more teams now that are just not worried about preseason. They're more avoiding injuries and using the regular season as the ramp up. And it kind of feels like a preseason game and they start a little bit slow. And teams like the Packers, teams like the Rams are okay with that approach. Other teams not okay with going into week 1 a little underprepared.
I don't have the answer, but I do think that is a testament of a great coach, you know, knowing what your team needs. You know, I mean, how old are they? What kind of shape are they in? You know, so we talked about this a lot in Steelers camp, of course, because Tomlin yesterday said everybody healthy is going to play in some regard in Tampa Bay on Friday. And I was shocked by that. I'm like, Cam Hayward, TJ Watt, you know, I mean, like, I mean, that might mean a series, but you also have to think. So I brought this point up on the air too. Like, it's not as big a deal for quarterbacks, but the 5-0 linemen and the quarterbacks in week 1 are going to play every snap. They're the only people on the field that you know that's true. And you know it's true that they have not done that since their last game from the year before. So O-lineman to me, plus the continuity factor, even if it's an old-ass Eagles line, you know, I would play the O-line a fair amount, you know what I mean, and get those guys 60 snaps in a game or close to it, you know what I mean?
You need them playing like a unit.
Yeah.
I totally get that. But at the same time, all of your star players, I mean, I would sit most of those guys, especially the veteran guys. For example, your Steelers. I don't know that TJ Watt or Cam Hayward needs a snap, right?
Right. I mean, like, you think Trent Williams is going to play a snap for your
Niners? No, absolutely
of course
not. Christian McCaffrey, there's no need to put your star running back out there on the field in the preseason. You know, J.K. Dobbins, a great example by JDS there.
Right.
You do need to build up some continuity with your team, but there's certain positions, certain players that it makes a ton of sense. But you want to not be bad all around. And there's young players that need a lot of snaps. And so I don't think there's a perfect way to do it. I think every team needs to know their own personnel. I think you put that well, that it's up to each team, each coach to know what his team needs. And it's up to your coach to not overdo it and still have your team ready for week 1. I think it's bad to have the opportunity to get your team ready and not do it, though.
I hear what you're saying. Yeah. And part of it's how hard do you practice? Do you have group practices with other teams? I mean, to me, that's even more valuable than preseason because you can do 3rd and longs. You can do 2 minutes. You know, you can really specialize on what you're going to do. and I'm going to stick with the Steelers, but every team listening has the same type of dudes. I mean, Bosa brothers, whoever, Miles Garrett, whomever. But when Coach said that about everyone that's healthy is going to play, I kind of went, ooh, I hope it's only a series. You know, like
old school mindset, old school vibe.
it is.
Players play, and that's what we do. What I think about is when you go through a preseason game and everything that happens in a game, getting a player ready and getting on the field. Like, imagine how much, and it's a drop in the bucket. It's obviously not a big deal, but just think about like it's almost wasteful. Like how much time. So a high end athlete, TJ Watt, right? How much like tape is on his hands that gets used to play 3 snaps.
Three snaps.
More, warming up and the time it will take, one of the staff members to get him ready and pregame massage, everything that goes into getting ready to play a game that you would have to go through. And maybe it's good for everybody, the guy who's doing the tape on the ankles. Maybe it's good for him to get some practice in the preseason too.
I think it kind of is, yeah.
Ways to go through all of that, and then the guy goes and plays 3 snaps and then takes his helmet off and sits there.
Yeah, Steelers defense has a 3 and out on the first series, and we're done. And they're just all laughing and joking on the sidelines. They mentioned the Rams, though. To me, this will be really interesting. When you're McVay and you've got a loaded team, you're coming off a Super Bowl or a 13-win season, and you're so star dependent, I think, and oh, by the way, we brought this up. Before last year, they were the healthiest team in the league during the McVay era. Does that have something to do with not playing in the preseason? Maybe. But this year, the Rams look much different than they did a year ago or 2 years ago. Like, there's no chance Aaron Donald plays a snap. But the other 10 defensive starters, like none of whom we can name, I would play them like crazy. Where 2 years ago, they're not going to play. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the Rams has become the easiest one, I think, this preseason. There's 3 guys who don't play, and everyone else plays as much as possible.
Exactly. Where before it was don't play any starters. I mean, I'm sure McVay changes his tune this year.
There's just too much development needed on that team.
It
changes. But, with the exception of Stafford, Cup, Donald.
But, I mean, think about it. And this is really true for rookies. I mean, rookies, let's say you're a 3rd-round rookie and you end up being a really good player. You probably played in all 3 preseason games, 17 regular season games, and maybe 3 postseason games. You know what I mean? Like, if you're a 3rd-round rookie and won the Super Bowl that year or went to the Super Bowl, you played more than double you did the year before.
Yeah, you played 2 college seasons.
Right. I mean,
talk about the rookie wall. That's why.
Yeah, right, without question. And
then rookies getting ready and how much they put their body through in the process of getting ready for the draft and all of that too.
Well, they didn't have a real offseason either.
Right. Yeah. There was no rest period. But for the most part, don't get your hopes up, guys, for seeing a lot of star power in week 1 of the preseason.
No.
Especially. And it's a time for those back of the roster guys to start to show a little something. Like the Hall of Fame game, perfect example. And these are the players I'm looking for all across the league every game. Who are those guys that were maybe not even high draft picks, that like Dorian Thompson-Robinson, in the Browns game, in the Hall of Fame game. Those are the type of players you're looking for. Those running, like every team has a running back. This is another thing that happens in the preseason that I love. It happens every year. There's glowing reports about a player in camp that's sort of a no-name player or a late round draft pick or an undrafted guy, and everyone thinks, oh man, we found a superstar. This guy's amazing. Regular season comes around, he gets cut or doesn't even get a chance to play. He's on the practice squad for a year and then disappears. And I'm sure that it's happened with the Steelers multiple times. I can think of a bunch of guys that it's happened with the 49ers. There was a guy, there's a pass rusher named Marcus Rush, and he had a bunch of sacks in the preseason. He never played a snap in the NFL. Corey Sheets was another guy. Everyone thought he was going to be a superstar player. Fast running back. He never had a career. And I'm sure there's going to be more this year. So when the real games happen, things are a little bit different. And I think of a guy actually with the Steelers, Jaylen Warren, right? Backup running back.
I was going to mention him because he's about a week into camp. I'm like, that's a dude.
He's been a camp star, and like people are drafting him in their fantasy leagues, but it's like, well, he doesn't have much of a path to play. He might be a star player someday, but he needs like
stars or
Najee Harris to break his leg first.
Right. What was I going to say along those lines? There was something I wanted to talk about. I don't know. Sorry. I slipped my mind. I'm getting old. 50-year-old moment there. Okay, I'll remember later in the podcast.
Yeah, let me know when you remember what you're going to say there. Let's tie into a couple other conversations that we're going to have today. and a question about is it possible that players are gamers and don't maybe practice well in games? So we'll tackle
I want to talk about that too.
And
that leads into this.
Yes, next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. August is here. You know what that means. Preseason football, of course, but it's also the official start of fantasy football drafting month. Get championship ready for your home league by trying out best ball on Underdog Fantasy. All you do is you have one live snake draft, but there's no waivers, no trades. Your lineup is automatically set every week of the season. So after you draft, your team is done, and whatever your maximum point lineup would have been that week, those are the points you get for your team. And it's a fun way to draft, fun way to get ready for your league and your fantasy seasons. And you make a little cash along the way as well at Underdog. Try out Underdog's Best Ball Mania Tournament. The largest fantasy football contest of all time is back and even bigger this year with $15 million of total prizes up for grabs, including an absurd $3 million going to the winner. Last year, the winner drafted their team in July, so don't wait around. Visit UnderdogFantasy.com or find them on the App Store and sign up with promo code LOCKEDON to get your first deposit doubled up to $100. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code LOCKEDON. How about this one? And I'm sure we can find some examples of this as well. And it kind of goes along with the guys who look like a star in practice and disappear in games and vice versa. Joey Bag of Donuts asks, is it possible that players can be gamers in that they don't practice well, but play well in games?
100%. And real quick, back to the last question. As an overlying theme, I am more in favor of rest than play your stars, especially your veterans. You know what I mean? So I don't think I made that clear enough. But this is pretty much a fact, is the week following preseason game number 1, more than any time in the year, is when depth charts change the most. You know, like, we did all this practice. I think I feel good about him. And then he just blows assignment after assignment in the first round, in the first season. Or, man, maybe he isn't a practice player, but he's getting his hands on the football time and time again. Or it's huge for special teams. It's hard to teach. It's hard to practice special teams. I mean, a lot of it's walk through tempo. You're not going to run 11 dudes down the field and blast the return guy. You know, I mean, it's not going to do it.
It's any of the contact stuff, because even when they put pads on in camp, it gets a little bit more ornery and there's more contact. But
there is
nobody's in tackle. The quarterbacks aren't getting hit. I mean, that changes things when you're a quarterback and you drop back in the pocket and the speed of a regular season game versus the speed of practice, and you can get ear holed at any moment. That changes the dynamic of everything. How about running backs? You go watch a training camp practice, and every running back takes it to the house on every play when they would for a 1 yard gain.
And
you know,
fans cheer, and
right. Like, this guy's looking great. It's like, well, yeah, he's fast and it looks good, but it's closer to practicing in shorts than it is practicing into a real game. And then you have the other side of it, where players are utilizing that time to make mistakes and learn from their mistakes. And, famously, Jimmy Garoppolo threw 5 interceptions, not just 5 interceptions in a practice, 5 interceptions in a row in training camp practice in 2019. And guess what? They were in the Super Bowl that year with Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback.
Right.
And Jimmy's one of the best examples recently that I can think of, just because he throws a ton of picks in practice. He throws some picks in games too, but takes more chances in practice, it seems like. And he's doing it again in Raiders camp.
It's not like he threw a ton in Raiders camp. And maybe the coaches are saying, Jimmy, let it all fly. I want you to teach. I'm trying to teach you to be more aggressive today. If you throw 100 picks, I don't care. So there's things about this process that make me a little crazy. And a lot of it's like you just said. First of all, if anyone in any preseason game kicks off out of the end zone on purpose, I lose my mind. I'm like, you get so few reps to practice kickoff and you just blast it out of the end zone. Like, what are we even doing here? Like, that's a huge pet peeve of mine. I'm going to always spin this back to Steeler camp, because I spent 1 million hours there the last couple of weeks. But here's a small example, and every team has the same thing, kind of like you just said. One of the things I didn't love about Pickett's rookie year was, on average, he held the football for about 3 seconds, which was high. It's not Justin Fields high, but it's high. And at Pitt, he held the ball very long, and he got away with it. They had a good O-line. They weren't playing Georgia every week, et cetera, et cetera. So one of my little Pickett points is, I want to see him get the ball out of his hands quicker. Okay. So he's extending plays in practice like every quarterback does and hits Pickens downfield, whatever. The crowd cheers. Oh, the offense is going to be great. And I'm sitting there on the air kind of doing play-by-play like, that would have been a sack. That would have been a sack. That would have been a sack. And then at one point, I just got my phone out and just started stop watching. How long is he holding the ball? 3 seconds is nothing. I mean, it's 4, it's 5,
right.
You know, like that's but then everyone else doesn't get better. You know what I mean? Like, and some of these drills are crazy too. Like there was a one-on-one running back versus linebacker drill. And everyone's like, boy, Najee and Warren and Anthony McFarland are going to have huge years. I'm like, they're asking a linebacker to cover 53 1/3 yards width and 30 yards to the end zone. And there's just 2 people on the field. You think those backs are going to get open and there's no pass rush and the quarterback's going to hold the ball for 10 seconds. Like,
yeah. And, dude, and every Instagram, every the Twitter highlight, you look at social media and you see it from every training camp practice every day. And it's like, wow, look at the route by this guy. And it was like, what are you talking about, the route by this guy? He had 7 breaks in this route, and it took 7 seconds for him to finally get the ball. And it's like, yeah, he showed some quickness there, but like that route ain't happening.
And frankly, much of the media are dopes. They think that's good stuff. So they put it on Twitter. It gets clicks. They write about all these skill position players that are having huge camps. And then back to this question, they get in stadiums and they don't get open in time. And the guy that runs the quick slant for 5 yards is the one getting the ball, you know, and the media folks didn't realize that's what real football is. I mean, there's a lot of that.
The route runner with precision that runs his route exactly 1 yard off the hash where he's supposed to be with the perfect timing to combine with the other routes in combination, you know, and can get in and out of his breaks with the least amount of wasted motion. Those are the route runners you're looking for, not the guy who puts the in shorts highlight, the 7-on-7 highlight. And social media folks too are just like praying. They're like, oh, give me a one-handed catch that I can put in slow motion and put it on social media, you know, and get everybody hyped up. But it's not the reality. Not the reality.
And again, I keep spinning it back to the Steelers, but Pickens had a one-handed catch that the whole world lost his mind on. But the thing I want to see from him is better separation. Well, Joey Porter Jr. was in his back pocket the whole time. He didn't separate at all. I mean, it was still a phenomenal play. Great. But I want to see him breaking free on slants and crossers and stuff like that. And along those lines, again, it's a Steeler thing. Their first 2 picks were a left tackle and a corner. That's the worst positions ever for social media because you have 10 really good plays in a row and then you're beat once and all you see is Nick Herbig beating Broderick Jones. What a bust he's going to be. You know, it's unbelievable.
A good block is pretty boring to watch sometimes unless
nobody cares.
Great pancake or something that happens.
Right. So if you're a corner or a tackle, good luck. Just get to the games. You know what I mean?
All right. Speaking of corners, how about Sauce versus Garrett Wilson in the Hard Knocks practices? Matt sounds like he's pretty bullish on Rodgers, maybe even for another MVP run with the Jets after watching Hard Knocks. Real quick, though, a question about Eric Bieniemy, and this kind of goes back to, you know, the old school versus new school that are different approaches in the preseason. But clearly, it's a different league, and players are treated different growing up now all the way through. And then you get some old school coaches, and maybe there's a clash there. And a question here about is where do you stand on the Eric Bieniemy issue? So apparently there's a little bit of an issue happening in DC with new offensive coordinator for the Commanders, Eric Bieniemy, possibly being too hard on the players, or are the Washington players being too soft and spoiled?
I guess we never know because some of these Belichick disciples come in and with their big sticks and they're super unlikable, and maybe Reed disciples are the same way. I have to be outshine my mentor, blah, blah, blah. But my initial thoughts are that Commander organization needs a whooping. You know what I mean? Like they need to be put on timeout. They need to change the way their behavior. They need to go to boarding school for a while. Like it's been such a toxic environment from day one that any change from a winning coach, player, et cetera, I'm going to side that direction. You know, ding dong, the witch is dead, but the witch still has a stink of that building. You know what I mean?
I go back to the the Play Callers podcast, which was by Jordan Rodriguez recently. She did a great job on this. And something that Sean McVay said, and he was, he's a new school coach and very upbeat. And he said that one of the things that's very new school that didn't happen before that he's all about is players asking why. And an old school, it doesn't matter why. You do exactly what I tell you, or your butt's going to be on the bench, right? Sean McVay wants to tell the players why, so they understand what the heck is going on and what they're doing together, and why they're doing what they're doing. And I
they can tell other players why.
Say that. Right.
Yeah, it's a good point. No, that's a great way of looking at it. Some of the old, here's a wet rag for you to suck on for water, or the two-a-days and stuff like that. It's like, it wasn't better. Right?
I just read recently, like everybody growing up knows this, is like when you're huffing and puffing at the end of practice and you're dying and you're like bending over and putting your hands on your knees trying to get some air, and the coaches are like, no, you got to put your hands over your head, and that's how you get better oxygen. And that was been completely debunked. It was like, I know it was bull crap. Like, that's definitely not helping you, man.
If you're bent over, you show your weakness.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's like, I get it if you're like trying to show somebody that you're not tired in a game, but when you're at practice and you like need oxygen in your body, putting your hands on top of your head is definitely not going to help you.
It's not the way it works, right?
Yeah. So some of it's just being smart, and so we're learning. We're learning all together, and I have no idea which way it is with the Washington Commanders right now. But
no, I don't.
Obviously, everybody over there hopes that works well, because they got a new offensive coordinator. If it doesn't work, there might be an entire new staff next year.
Right. Maybe Bieniemy shows enough that he gets a head coaching job somewhere else, or he gets the bump there. I mean, I give him all the credit in the world of betting on himself. I mean, he could have stayed in Kansas City, maybe got another ring, chilled out,
It's tough because it might be his only shot. You got 1 year, and it either goes great or you never get a head coach shot and you're done.
And it's you and Sam Howell, and let's go.
Yeah, so what's going on there. Okay, Hard Knocks, Aaron Rodgers, the New York Jets, and is the run game going to continue to make a comeback in the NFL? Next. Thanks once again, everybody, for making Peacock and Williamson your first listen every day on the Locked On Podcast Network. Make sure you are subscribed, hit the notification, the thumbs up. We appreciate there on YouTube, or find us wherever you listen to your podcasts. All right, a couple different folks asked us about Hard Knocks and our thoughts in a couple of different angles. I know Sauce versus Garrett Wilson is worth the price of admission there with two really talented first-round picks, top 10 picks from last season for the Jets, and sky's the limit for both of those players. And man, I'm kind of daring to dream how good Garrett Wilson could be, in a fantasy setting and in a real life setting with the upgrade he's got at quarterback in Aaron Rodgers. What is your takeaway from watching some of this Hard Knocks? And do you think it's more likely that Aaron Rodgers is an MVP guy for the Jets this year, or if he's the guy who's kind of looks more like he's kind of done an end of career like he did last year with the Packers?
So I watched it last night and put it in context. I had a long day at Steeler training camp, which is about an hour and a half from home. I had to do 5 straight hours of radio, didn't get off the air till 8, got home at like 9:30. Hung with the wife for a little. She dozed off on the couch. I'm sipping my Basil Hayden, happy to be in my lazy boy and not that tiny ass dorm room, and being happy to be home. All right, I forgot there's a new Hard Knocks. Let's throw that on. But Matt, be a professional. Don't go overboard with the hype. They're going to be, pumping Rodgers to no end. You've watched Hard Knocks for years. They only show you what they want to see. Don't get emotional. Don't change the Jets, win total to 17-0. I think the Jets are going to be 17-0. No. I mean, I totally bought in hook, line, and sinker after the first episode. I mean, you mentioned the Gardner Wilson thing. I just want to make sure we touch on that. But the Rodgers stuff stole the show, as you can imagine. But it sure looks like Sauce and Wilson have this tremendous on-field relationship, because every rep, they rep each other, it looks like, all the time. They shake each other's hands, kind of like Dion and Rice did or whatever. They shake each other's hands. They slap each other 5. They go hard as can be from whistle to whistle. They pick the other one up and like, oh, you got me on that one. Or, but, it is iron sharpening iron to with no dirtiness and just total hug afterward. Wow, what a catch. Hug you. Boy, what a play you made, Sauce. Give me a hug, high five. You're really great. Even though it was against me. That was awesome. And I'm like, man, those two could just be the best in the league at their positions, maybe, playing against each other all the time. But watching Rodgers in that environment, and like Mecole Hardman comes up to him like he's Elvis in the 60s, like can't even talk to him. It was like the Beatles storming America, like you knew there'd be hype. It's New York, but like Mecole Hardman's like, you were my favorite player growing up, and like can't even form sentences. And I loved you in Madden.
Patrick Mahomes.
Right. And of course they only show you what you want, but Rodgers is so effortless out there. They're all looking up to him. The Hall of Fame game, he's got a headset on and he's calling plays, and they're not calling plays, but he's helping Wilson tremendously and just very, very engaged. And he makes this throw. They show I think it was a defense. It was either defense coordinator or the defensive back room. I'm sure, almost certain it was the defensive back room. And it's a goal line period or red zone period. And the defensive back has awesome coverage on this receiver. And Rodgers throws a 1 in a million ball into, a perfect spot. And of course, everyone's pissed on defense. But in the room, the defensive back coach goes, guys, if you play like that, we'll win the Super Bowl, because the only one on the planet that can make that throw is on our team. And you can just see everyone's like, wow, the savior has just walked in and he walks on water, The
confidence, the buy-in that can change, not just for your receivers, but throughout, even the defensive unit on the team.
That's exactly it. And you just feel it watching that show. And maybe I had a little too much Basil Hayden. I don't know. But I was like, Rodgers is not going through the motions here. He's in, and everybody is his disciple. They are. Let's go. And think about, no offense to Wilson and Flacco, but they haven't had anything like him since Namath. They opened the show showing Joe Namath,
He's one of the most franchises have never had someone like that.
Right. But boy, Jason he is dialed in.
This one from Jason. Do you see the trend continuing of teams leaning into the run more this season, shell coverage, underside linebackers, etc., playing into that sort of the zig to the zag of the league, passing more and having more smaller, faster players on the field that and more two deep safeties?
I think so, but deep down they'll never tell you. I remember we did that episode about scoring being down. That was, I don't know, a month ago or something like that.
Right. So this trend has already started a little bit. It started last year.
Time. Right. But I bet deep down the league is not happy about scoring being down. And a lot of it's scheme, a lot of it's D linemen are better than O linemen, et cetera, et cetera. I think they want fantasy points to be up, quarterbacks to look better. And I'm not sure what's going to happen, but I just have a hunch. My spidey sense tells me coaches are holding might become legal again, or, we might see more big plays in some way, shape, or form. But I think the running game's a great equalizer.
It's still, I just think it's still balance.
Yeah.
So you need to do both. But again, running game doesn't mean running back. So I don't know if it's going to help the star running back get paid more unless these guys continue to stay healthy. If like all the top running backs, like it was a really good year. It was a good year for running back health actually last year, which was kind of part of it. We saw Jacobs and Barkley and Saquon. And Christian McCaffrey. Like all these guys were healthy all year long. Is McCaffrey? I talk about this on Locked On 49ers all the time. It's like, okay, cool. Like I thought it was a dubious trade, spending a lot for a running back. You know how I feel about running backs in the NFL, and the league is telling us that. But it was like, okay, man, that was awesome. Like Christian McCaffrey was a difference maker, and he was really good. He played 20 games last year. You expect a number one running back to get that many carries and touches and play 20 more games again to go win? Like that's just a tough ask. And so running game, yes, I don't know how it's going to play into running back value around the league. But I think you're just going to see teams, okay, you're going to give us this. We're going to take this and start the march, but they're going to be out of the corner of their eye. Like, I'm just waiting for that safety to come down, and then we're going to hit you.
Yeah. I said this a lot last year. It applied for the Bears until the wheels came off from the Bears, and they started trading everybody away and all that stuff. But the Bears, the Giants, the Falcons, this time last year, if I told you the Bears, Lions, and Falcons are going to pick 1, 2, 3 in the draft and take Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, and whoever, You would have believed that. Not that, one of them went to the playoffs, one of them outkicked their coverage, and I just kept saying voluminous running. I mean, if I can just run and run and run and run, I shorten the game, and I think that travels. It doesn't matter your environment. You're in a dome and you can't hear. You can still run the football. There's a lot of teams that got back to the ground game, and it's raised the floor.
It's still and the defense is still are asking. That's what the defense is telling you. I was like, we would rather you do that. So go ahead.
Right.
We don't want the big play. We don't want the 3, 4, 5 play drive. We want the 10, 11, 12 play drive. Good luck.
And the Chiefs are a great example. They weren't a great running team, but they led the league in 10+ yard drive or 10+ play drives, no Tyreek Hill, and they just slice and dice what you gave them. You know what I mean? Whether it's pass or run or whatever. You
mentioned Basil Hayden a minute ago, Matt. And I do want to shout out one listener, John, who said, Matt, loved meeting you the other night at Sharky's. Pick one team with lots of expectations like the Jets, Chargers, Browns to disappoint, and one most likely consensus bottom feeder, maybe Steelers, Commanders. I love how he throws the Steelers in there for you. Commanders or Raiders that make the playoffs.
Well, I'm not counting the Steelers as a bottom feeder, and it was nice to meet you as well, and that was cool. I met a lot of fans over the last couple of weeks. It's been super cool. I just talked a lot of Jets, so I'm going to exclude them. But I've been saying this all off season. I guess the Chargers count here as well. But Jets, Lions, Browns, I'm 50 and they've never won anything ever. I still believe Harbaugh, Peyton, Carroll, Tomlin know how to win. And I think a lot of organizations don't. And I was part of the Browns and we had no clue how to win. I can't put all my chips in. I just said a lot about Aaron Rodgers, so I'm going to stay away from them. But I kind of think the Lions and Browns and maybe Chargers that aren't greatly run teams over the years are going to let us down, or at least half of them are, Yeah,
that's a great point.
They haven't won anything ever.
What a year it would be, right? Will the world stop spinning if it's like in the NFC AFC championship game,
right?
It's like the Jets against the Browns, and in the NFC, it's the I don't know, it's the Lions again.
Lions for sure.
Yeah, name another team that just hasn't been there. The Bears maybe. That's
right.
Got a really tough time finding a quarterback. If they get a superstar quarterback, all of a sudden, be like, wow. So
I think there's something to that, though. And I know some of it's my Steeler roots and tradition, and I've only seen 3 head coaches. But the fact that the Giants, Browns, and Lions have won nothing really in my lifetime, I don't think it's an accident.
Shout out to everybody that helps Matt Williamson shut down Sharky's when you're at training camp.
If you're at Latrobe, go to Sharky's and feel free to buy me a Miller Lite. I won't mind.
Sharky's in Latrobe. And speaking of the Bears, we're going to be talking with Lauren Cox to preview those Chicago Bears, who's the standouts of camp there, Justin Fields, and the expectations for the Chicago Bears in 2020.
Oh, BP. I meant to tell you this to start the show. Before I hit play on Hard Knocks last night with my Basil Hayden, you know what I did sitting there in my lazy boy with my laptop? You're never going to guess, but it's going to make you happy. I wrote my Steelers-Niners Week 1 preview for Steelers Digest. Let's go.
We finalize the Brock. Now that we know the Brock Purdy's healthy, we got to finalize this Brock Purdy versus Kenny Pickett bet of ours.
Yeah, I wrote my preview for Steelers Digest. It's an old school publication. It comes out once a month, so they just want the Week 1 game from me. I'm like, okay, let's go. 1,000 words. Niners.
So any ideas on that bet? Let us know at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL in the YouTube comments. Matt and I back tomorrow right here, Peacock and Williamson.